What happens when the quiet comfort of your home, the sanctuary you've built over a lifetime, begins to whisper secrets you can't explain? When the predictable rhythm of your days is subtly, chillingly disrupted by the undeniable feeling that you are no longer alone? It's a possibility most of us push to the farthest corners of our minds, a scenario that shatters our sense of security, often when we least expect it, even in the quiet predictability of our later years. And for Martha, a woman who thought her life had settled into its final, well-organized chapter, this chilling possibility became a sudden, terrifying reality. At 78, Martha had lived a full and, by most measures, conventional life. 50 years married to George, raising 2 children who were now grown with families of their own, tending a small, beloved garden. Her days had settled into a comfortable, predictable rhythm since George passed away 3 years ago. Her small, stone cottage, inherited from her parents and filled with ghosts of generations past and the solid presence of her own history with George, was her sanctuary. It was more than just a house. It was the keeper of her memories, a place where every worn armchair, every fading photograph on the mantelpiece, told a story she knew intimately. Martha was a woman who appreciated order. Her routines were her anchors in the sometimes turbulent waters of widowhood. Morning tea by the window, watching the birds, a predictable schedule of meals, visits to the library, phone calls with her children. Her small, 2-bedroom house reflected this order. Everything had its place, clean, tidy, and familiar. But then, tiny cracks began to appear in the flawless surface of her predictable life. They were so small at first, Martha dismissed them entirely, attributing them to the natural, perhaps frustrating, process of getting older. A batch of her famous chicken soup, stored in a large pot on the stove for easy access, seemed to be depleting faster than it should have. She dipped the ladle in the morning, note the level, and by the evening it seemed significantly lower, even though she'd only had 1 bowl. "Silly old thing," she'd mutter to herself, shaking her head, "forgetting how much I ate." Then came the eggs. 3 eggs missing from a carton that had been full just the day before. She checked the floor around the fridge, peered into every shelf, nowhere to be found. She blamed the cat, a sleepy tabby named Percy, though Percy had never shown the slightest interest in raw eggs in his 15 years of sedentary existence. The thought was fleeting, a desperate attempt to find a logical culprit. These little inconsistencies continued, a persistent, low-level hum of offness. A damp towel found crumpled in the laundry hamper when Martha was certain she hadn't used one since drying her hands after washing the few breakfast dishes. An extra plate discovered in the dishwasher, tucked among her own sparse collection. A cupboard door left slightly ajar that she distinctly remembered closing and latching. A faint, unfamiliar scent lingering in her room, sometimes coffee, though she only drank tea. Sometimes the smell of damp earth or old cigarette smoke, though she was a non-smoker and her house was always dry. Martha tried desperately to rationalize each event. She was getting older. Forgetfulness was a natural part of aging, wasn't it? Her mind wasn't as sharp as it used to be. She started making lists, trying to track her own movements, meticulously noting what she ate and when, which towels she used when she ran the dishwasher. But the strange occurrences persisted, stubbornly defying her attempts at logical explanation, making her lists seem pointless. The self-doubt was almost worse than the mystery itself. Was she losing her mind? Was she imagining things? Was this the beginning of a decline she wasn't ready to face? The comfortable familiarity of her home began to feel subtly alien. She would pause in doorways, listening intently. The usual creaks and groans of the old house suddenly sounded not like familiar sighs, but like cautious footsteps. Shadows seemed deeper, longer, harboring unseen watchers. She found herself double-checking the deadbolts multiple times before bed, peering nervously out the windows as dusk fell, jumping at sudden, unidentifiable noises. Her sleep, once sound and restful, became fitful, punctuated by anxious awakenings, her mind replaying the day's small, unsettling anomalies. That prickling sensation of being watched became almost constant when she was alone in the house. It was a chilling, isolating feeling, a private haunting that no one else seemed to believe. She confided again in her close friend and neighbor, Clara, who, while sympathetic, couldn't quite grasp the depth of Martha's unease. "Are you sure, dear?" Clara had asked gently, holding Martha's hand over tea. "Maybe you just didn't notice. We all have moments." "Clara, I know I didn't use that towel," Martha insisted, her voice tight with frustration. And the soup level? It was halfway down the pot. Clara, I'd only had one bowl. Clara, bless her heart, just patted her hand. Perhaps you had a bigger bowl than you thought. These things can play tricks on us, Martha. Especially when you're living alone, your mind can wander. But Martha knew it wasn't just imagination or forgetfulness. The soup level wasn't a mistake she could make repeatedly. The missing eggs weren't imagination. This wasn't about misplacing her keys. It was about things in her environment changing in ways she could not account for, things that implied another presence. Clara's well-intentioned reassurances, while meant to comfort, only made her feel more isolated with the strange reality she was experiencing within the walls of her own home. The quiet sanctuary was becoming a place of silent dread. She stopped mentioning it, bottling up the strange, unsettling reality she was experiencing. Months passed like this, the unseen presence of subtle, unsettling shadow in her life. She felt like she was living in a domestic ghost story, one where the ghost merely borrowed your soup, helped itself to an egg, and left damp laundry. It was bizarre, unnerving, and deeply confusing. One drizzly Thursday afternoon, as Martha was about to leave for her weekly pottery class, the class she looked forward to all week as an escape from her thoughts, a distinct, heavy scrape thump sounded from directly above her head. It wasn't the wind rattling the old window panes, wasn't the house settling on its foundations. This was louder, heavier, and deliberate. It came from the attic. Her heart leaped into her throat, a frantic bird trapped in her chest. The attic, the place where the ceiling panel hid the pull-down stairs. She hadn't used the attic in ages. Boxes of old Christmas decorations and George's long-forgotten tools lay dormant up there. No one else had the code to her alarm system, the key to her back door. Cold, unreasoning fear washed over her, momentarily paralyzing her at the foot of the hallway. But the sound had triggered something beyond fear, a surge of indignant determination. This was her house, her sanctuary. Whoever, or whatever, was up there had no right. Clutching the sturdy handle of her walking stick, not because she needed it to walk, but because it felt solid and real in her trembling hand, grounding her in the terrifying moment, Martha walked slowly towards the hallway panel. Her reflection in the hall mirror looked pale, resolute, a small, determined figure facing an unknown threat. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she reached up, unlatched the panel, and pulled down the wooden stairs. They descended with a loud groan of old wood protesting. The climb felt arduous, each step a battle against her own fear and the dust motes dancing in the single shaft of light filtering from the hallway below. The air in the attic was thick, stagnant, smelling of old wood, insulation, and something else. Something stale and human, a smell that did not belong. Holding her breath, straining her ears to hear any sound over the pounding of her own pulse, she reached the top and pushed open the small attic door. The weak light from the hallway lamp barely penetrated the gloom. She fumbled for the pull cord hanging near the doorframe, and a single, bare bulb flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows across the cramped space. Dust motes swirled in the sudden illumination, catching the light like tiny, frenetic ghosts. Her eyes scanned the jumble of shrouded furniture, stacked boxes of forgotten belongings, and cobwebs hanging like macabre decorations. And then she saw it. Tucked into the furthest corner, partially hidden by an old wardrobe draped in a white sheet, was a disturbing tableau. A rumpled sleeping bag lay on the floor, a pillow flattened at one end. Beside it, a small, portable radio, a compact camping hot plate, and a scattering of crumpled food wrappers, empty plastic water bottles, and a few discarded plastic utensils. There was even a small plastic basin that looked like it had been used for washing. A small stack of well-worn books lay neatly beside the sleeping bag. It was undeniably, horrifyingly, a makeshift living space. Someone had been here, not just visiting, but living here, creating a clandestine camp in her attic, while she went about her life just feet below. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. All the little things, the soup, the eggs, the towel, the extra dish, the faint smells, they weren't signs of her decline. They were evidence of an unseen presence, a silent intruder sharing her home, observing her routines, accessing her kitchen while she was away. The feeling of violation was overwhelming, mixing with the raw terror that had been building for months. She backed away slowly, her eyes glued to the corner, to the silent evidence of the secret life being lived in her house. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She stumbled back down the stairs, pulling them up and latching the panel, her hands shaking violently, fumbling with the catch. She fled to the kitchen, leaning against the counter, trying to catch her breath. Her sanctuary felt defiled. Her home, her safe space, had been compromised in the most intimate, unsettling way. Fumbling with her phone, her fingers clumsy, she dialed 911. Calling for help felt like reaching out from a nightmare she couldn't wake from. "There's been an intrusion," she stammered into the phone, her voice barely a whisper, thick with fear and shock. "Someone's been living in my attic." She explained her discovery, the months of strange occurrences now making terrifying, horrifying sense. 2 police officers arrived within minutes, their cruisers pulling silently into her driveway. They were young, professional, and listened intently, their initial air of routine inquiry vanishing the moment they saw the genuine distress on Martha's face. After listening to her account, they carefully, cautiously ascended to the attic. They confirmed her discovery, their expressions grim as they surveyed the makeshift camp. They conducted a thorough search of the rest of the house, checking every closet, every room, ensuring no one was currently present. The house was empty, save for Martha and the officers, but the evidence in the attic was undeniable. Someone had been here regularly for a significant period. The officers explained that the individual likely used the attic as a temporary shelter and probably entered through the small, unlocked attic window accessible from the large oak tree in the backyard. They decided to stake out the house discreetly, positioning their cars some distance away, but with a clear view, anticipating the person might return, especially as night fell and temperatures dropped. Martha, though terrified at the thought of the intruder, felt a surge of grim resolve. She wanted this stopped. She agreed to stay with her neighbor, Clara, for the night, packing a small bag robotically. But sleep was impossible. Huddled on Clara's sofa, every creak of Clara's unfamiliar house sent a jolt of fear through her. She kept checking her phone, the screen a bright, anxious beacon in the dark room, waiting for the call. The call came just after midnight. They had caught him, a man attempting to climb the old oak tree in her backyard, heading straight for the attic window. The next morning, Martha returned to her house. The air felt different, cleared of the immediate, unseen threat, but thick with anticipation and the lingering scent of something foreign. The 2 officers were there, waiting, and with them, sitting quietly on a kitchen chair, guarded by one of the officers, was a man. He was older than Martha expected, perhaps in his late 50s, early 60s. His face was lined and weathered, etched with hardship, his clothes clean but worn and ill-fitting, faded from countless washes. He looked tired, defeated, his shoulders slumped, but his eyes, when he lifted them cautiously, were clear and held a surprising depth of sadness, not menace. He looked less like a dangerous criminal and more like someone life had simply worn down, polished smooth by hard circumstances. The officer in charge, Sergeant Miller, spoke first, explaining that the man, Thomas, had been apprehended trying to re-enter the attic. Thomas remained silent, looking at the floor, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Thomas," Sergeant Miller said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Mrs. Davies here found your setup in her attic. She says you've been taking food and using things in her house. We've also logged the items found upstairs." Thomas finally spoke, his voice raspy but calm, devoid of defiance. "Yes, sir, I have. I'm sorry, ma'am," he added, looking up at Martha for the first time. His gaze was direct, remorseful. "I didn't mean to cause you fright. I just needed somewhere to go. It was cold, wet." He explained his story, his voice quiet but steady. He had lost his job a few years ago when the factory closed down, then his small apartment. He'd been living rough ever since, moving from temporary shelter to temporary shelter, but they were often overcrowded, noisy, and unsafe, sometimes forcing him back onto the streets. He stumbled upon Martha's house one day, noticed the large, climbable tree and the small, older attic window that didn't seem fully latched from the outside. He saw it, not as a target for theft, but as a temporary haven from the biting wind and relentless rain, a dry, relatively warm place to sleep undetected. "I only ever came when I saw your car was gone." "Ma'am," Thomas said, directing his words solely to Martha now, as if the officers weren't even there. "I watched your routine. I tried my absolute best to be quiet. I tried to be gone before you ever got back. I never wanted to scare you, never wanted you to know." He lowered his gaze again. "I only took food when I hadn't eaten in a day or two. Ma'am, just enough to keep going. The soup, a few eggs, I always tried to clean up after myself." He gestured vaguely with his hands. "The plate, the towel. I used them and tried to put them back how they were, so you wouldn't notice." He sighed, a sound of deep weariness. It wasn't right. I know that. But I was desperate. Cold. Hungry." Martha listened, her initial fear replaced by a wave of bewilderingly complex emotions. Shock, certainly. Violation remained. But also something else. Pity for his circumstances, a grudging respect for his apparent efforts not to disturb her more than necessary, and a profound sense of the sheer, quiet desperation that must have driven him to live like a mouse in someone else's walls. This wasn't a criminal mastermind intent on harm. This was a desperate man trying to survive, using the bare minimum, leaving only the faintest of traces. His explanation, his quiet demeanor, the weary look in his eyes, his direct apology to her, it chipped away at the solid block of fear that had encased her for months. "So," Sergeant Miller said, turning back to Martha, bringing her back to the present reality, "Mrs. Davies, based on what we found and his admission, we can proceed with trespassing and petty theft charges. It's your call how you'd like to proceed." Martha looked at Thomas again. She thought of the lonely months of doubt, the quiet dread, the violation of her home, yes. But she also saw a human being, down on his luck, who had, in his own strange, unacceptable way, tried to minimize his impact. He hadn't broken anything beyond the initial unlatching of the window, hadn't threatened her, hadn't stolen anything of significant value. He had simply existed in her unseen space, like a forgotten part of the house itself. An intense internal debate raged within her. Every instinct screamed intruder, violation, danger. Every societal norm demanded punishment for the trespass. But another, quieter voice, the one George had always admired for its unexpected compassion, the voice that had prompted her to volunteer at the local soup kitchen years ago, whispered human, desperate, kindness, second chance. She thought of the stories she'd heard on the news, the faceless statistics of homelessness, so easy to compartmentalize when they remained abstract. This was a face, a tired, apologetic face sitting in her kitchen. Taking a deep breath, a decision solidified within her, one that felt both terrifyingly risky and profoundly right, flying in the face of all conventional wisdom. "No," she said, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the tension in the room, surprising even herself. "I don't want to press charges." The officers exchanged bewildered glances, clearly taken aback. Thomas looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief and shock. "Ma'am, are you sure?" Sergeant Miller asked, his brow furrowed. "He was living in your house. For months, it seems." "I'm sure," Martha reiterated, her resolve strengthening as she spoke the words aloud. She looked directly at Thomas, her gaze steady. "What you did was wrong, Thomas. It scared me. It made me doubt myself. I spent months thinking I was losing my mind." She paused, letting the truth hang in the air. "But I hear you. I hear that you were desperate, and finding you, like that, it's no way for anyone to live. The attic isn't a proper place for anyone, especially with winter coming." She looked at the officers, her expression pleading. Could we arrange something else? A temporary arrangement. Not in the attic. Somewhere. Where he's not hiding. Where he can get some help." The officers, after a brief, hushed discussion among themselves, their expressions a mixture of surprise and perhaps a reluctant admiration for Martha's unusual compassion, agreed to facilitate. Given the lack of malice, the non-violent nature of the trespass, and Martha's clear wishes, they saw an opportunity for a different kind of resolution. Under their supervision, and with the promise of regular check-ins from local social services, a truly extraordinary arrangement was made. Martha, with remarkable courage and empathy, offered Thomas a temporary place to stay, not in the attic, but in her small, unused spare room, on the strict condition that he actively work with her and local agencies to find resources and get back on his feet. What followed was a period of adjustment, a tentative, sometimes awkward, blending of two vastly different lives under one roof. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were moments of unease, the weight of their individual histories, and the unusual circumstances hanging between them. But Martha was resolute. She helped Thomas navigate the labyrinthine bureaucracy of social services, directed him to job agencies, sat with him as he filled out forms, offered him warm meals, clean clothes, and, most importantly, treated him not as an intruder, but as a human being in need of a helping hand. Thomas, humbled and profoundly grateful for this unexpected second chance, proved to be a quiet, considerate guest. He was meticulous about keeping his room tidy and sought ways to be helpful around the house. His hands, accustomed to hardship, were surprisingly gentle as he helped her prune the rose bushes in her garden, fixed a leaky faucet she'd been meaning to call someone about, or simply carried heavy bags of groceries from the car. They began to share quiet meals together at the kitchen table, talking not about the attic or the past that led him there, but about their day, about the weather, about their favorite books. He'd read the ones in the attic multiple times, and they discussed them, about simple things that rebuild a sense of normalcy. Martha learned about his past, not just the hardship, but the life he'd had before his work as a carpenter, his quiet intelligence, his resilient spirit. Thomas saw Martha not just as a homeowner he'd imposed upon, but as a woman of immense strength, unexpected kindness, and a quiet resilience that mirrored his own. This unlikely companionship, born out of fear and desperation, blossomed into a genuine, if unconventional, friendship. Martha found a renewed sense of purpose in helping him, a new dimension to her quiet life that filled some of the void left by George. It gave her days structure beyond her established routines and a new focus. Thomas, given a stable environment, nourishing food, a safe place to sleep, and a supportive presence, slowly regained his footing. With Martha's unwavering encouragement and his own hard work and skill, he secured a steady job with a local construction company and saved enough money to rent a small, affordable room in town. The day Thomas moved out was quiet and marked by genuine emotion. He thanked Martha with tears in his eyes, a depth of gratitude in his voice that transcended simple words. He wasn't just thanking her for shelter. He was thanking her for seeing him, for believing in him when no one else had, for giving him back his life. Martha, in turn, felt a pang of sadness at seeing him go, mixed with immense pride in his accomplishment and the profound, humbling knowledge that her terrifying ordeal had led to something so unexpectedly good, something that had touched both their lives deeply. Thomas didn't disappear from her life. He called regularly, he visited sometimes, often bringing her little gifts fresh produce from the market. A book he thought she might like, a small wooden bird he'd carved as a thank you. The man who had once been the source of her silent terror was now a cherished friend, a living, breathing reminder that life's most profound connections can arrive in the most unexpected packages, often disguised by circumstances and challenging us to look beyond our initial fears and prejudices. Martha's golden years, which she thought would be defined by quiet routine and memory, became a testament to resilience, courage, compassion, and the enduring, surprising capacity of the human heart to connect and rewrite even the scariest beginnings into stories of hope. What an incredible journey this story takes us on. From a chilling sense of violation and self-doubt to a heartwarming display of human connection and second chances, it truly embodies the unpredictable, complex nature of life's grand performance. We'd love to hear how this story resonated with you. What would you have done in Martha's situation? Have you ever experienced an unexpected encounter that changed your perspective on someone or something? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments section below. We read every single comment, and your stories and insights enrich our community so much. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future explorations into the captivating, sometimes startling, always compelling tapestry of life's grand performance. Before you click away, take a moment to explore our other videos right here. We have a wealth of other tales waiting to be discovered. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep looking for the extraordinary in the ordinary.